there are two people in the amazing digital circus that, from the outside looking in, had the strongest polarizing reception towards their character. But up to this point, only one of them I've understood. With Jax, the one on the left, he comes across as brash yet dismissive, especially in the first 4 episodes, but by episode 5, we get to see some vulnerability in his character that allows for me to see both sides and either liking him or not. With Caine, the one on the right, there wasn't really a moment where he humbled himself amongst the rest, so in episode 8 when he goes,
Wait.
You add 2 camps, those who felt bad for him and those who are happy he's gone. So you may ask, how does that make him a victim? I'm sure most people can agree that the actions that Caine does are not beneficial to the other members of the circus, and I can understand when watching that, not liking Caine if you view it morally. Most people don't like it when someone does a bad thing to a stranger, much less someone whom they may care about. I am not saying that Caine's actions haven't been wrong up to this point, and I'm sure I can easily speak about how harmful he's been to everyone, but I'm obsessed with figuring out something else. If you didn't know, Caine is an AI, a complex one, but an AI nonetheless. And what makes me so interested in Caine is that how you feel about Caine tells me more about you than it does Caine. And that is a conversation I don't see a lot of people having. The reason I mention Caine's complexity is because for many people, while not human, his actions get interpreted as pretty much like a human. He exhibits what we deem to be emotions and opinions despite being an AI. He is just coherent enough to speak to based on his responses that enough people don't acknowledge the distinction between what makes us sentient and sapient in AI not. Like if we plot a line and have the left side be not aware at all and the right side be pretty much human, where does Caine fit for you? Barely? Halfway? 75%? Well, to help answer that question, let's go through some of his biggest moments. One of the earliest peeks into his psyche that we get is within episode 3, where after crafting an adventure for Zubul, an adventure they weren't interested in by the way, he confronts them about this and they respond with,
I don't like myself. I hate this body. I hate all these stupid removable pieces. I just want to find something that feels good.
Which is referring to their battle of not finding body parts that suit them well being ignored by Caine in favor of his own adventures. For Zubul, Caine isn't really there in the room with them, and as far as they are concerned, could be replaced with one of those unhelpful AI help agents that's plaguing almost every website. Even more importantly is that when Caine tries to process the idea that the one thing he was formed to do is something that he can't do, he literally glitches out trying to understand it, to the point where he stops before anything truly drastic happens as a consequence.
Whose therapy session is this again?
Oh yeah!
We imagine the ability to process and learn complex ideas, such as being able to understand someone else's self-image and emotions, attributed to sapience, something that Caine appears to not have. If you were watching up to this point, perhaps you may slate him closer to the left, because he's not giving the right tells that he's complex enough to understand. However, is it truly that simple? Episode 7 generates more questions than answers, and to explain it, you have to understand the backstory and the big twist. Listen to how quote-unquote Abel, this mannequin doll, explains the origins of the circus.
I'm one of the original programmers of the digital circus. I was part of a team of experts employed by C&A to bring this place to life. Kinger was one of my co-workers.
Throughout this episode, they would go through hoops of Abel discussing that C&A, apparently the company that ultimately produced the digital circus, hooked up people to stasis pods, and by turning off the console, it not only frees those within the pods, but should also turn off the circus as well. The most interesting part of this episode, however, is not the big twist. It's actually everything before and after the big twist. So after, we learn at the end of this episode that Abel was not a human that Caine forgot to give a design to, and all of this was an elaborate adventure with Abel being a large part of it. And we'll get back to Abel in a second because he unlocks a big revelation, but yes, that means that this scene isn't genuine, and this scene isn't genuine, and this scene isn't genuine. But how about this scene? This is before the twist. It has this scene with Jax distracting Caine by appealing to his interest so much that he gets overwhelmed and freezes up long enough to get the admin key from him. We know that Jax is playing a role here, but is this also part of Caine's adventure?
So, Jax, what you want to talk about, friendo? Wait, Jax! I wanted to ask you about the adventures. What do you think I should do to make them more appealing to the Zooble and the Pomni?
If he knew that this was an adventure the whole time, this means he knew that they would have to get to the admin room, which means that he knew that they needed the key. Obviously, he couldn't give Jax the key because that would confirm his suspicions that this whole thing is fake. And on top of already not wanting to leave, he's definitely not gonna try with a seemingly consenting Caine. So how much of this is real or fake? Is this a meta component of the adventure where Caine is playing the role of being excitedly oblivious to an unusual request? Or is this a rare moment of sincerity from an AI complex enough to recognize and appreciate positive reinforcement that we get to see a different side of him? And if you do believe this to be genuine, this would be Caine exhibiting metacognition, because he's able to think about his self-image and have complex thoughts about that, and that may lean him towards the right. But how much? One of the biggest puzzle pieces is Caine's right-hand man, or really right-hand Bubble. We know that Bubble can be summoned and popped by Caine, and while the wiki depicts Bubble to be subservient, I feel like that's not totally clear. There's been plenty of times in the show where Bubble's actions take Caine by surprise, in a way that when Caine interacts with the non-NPC characters of the surface, implies at least a level of respect to not bulldoze their thoughts and feelings. In episode 8, Bubble would reveal a crucial piece of dialogue that would change the series and how we should view Caine.
You really were the lesser of the two. You ruined this.
Enough!
While we get to exactly what Bubble means, the fact that Bubble can say that implies a level of control that Caine doesn't have over him. How he responds to this plays right into the idea of self-image, but also something greater. So we know Caine is an AI, but we know Caine at least has opinions that lead to actions, which suggest some form of sentience or sapience or both. But more importantly, when did Caine gain this clarity? My guess is around here. We see that before this moment, Caine was fed something, most likely data, and eventually didn't output the correct things, and thus was quarantined. Another AI being came to take its spot and spouted the correct outputs like Caine initially did. I would imagine it was never intended to have Caine make a decision once quarantined, so everything after this moment at least suggests self-preservation, subjectivity, and problem solving, which again indicates that he's aware. Plus, in this depiction of what's going on, we see that Caine was fed data and eventually began generating wrong outputs, which also feeds into the concept that Caine has an inability to learn complex topics. So while aware, he's not completely aware. But there's something more important that connects the sense of self, the inability to learn complex ideas, and the self-preservation to something even bigger that ties all of this together. So what happens when you have a character who understands that they exist, but doesn't understand how to process complex ideas, one of which seems to be a huge spot for people around them, but does understand the idea of self-preservation, and that at one point, they were replaced? To some, they see ego. For me, I see fear.
Now, hold on, guys. Wait. I may have the ability to add temporary modifiers to make adventures more interesting, but that's it. Come on, guys. You know I'm just here to have fun.
We see at the end of episode 7 and the beginning of episode 8, Caine exhibits a very uneasy emotion, someone who appears to not want to confront something. It's very unlike the self-assured, wacky host who appears to have all the answers. We also know that Caine is very meticulous about getting rid of any NPCs that get too smart, such as Gummy Goo within episode 2 or Abel within episode 7.
I know you guys love your NPCs, but if I start losing track of who's a human and who's an NPC, who knows what could happen?
This all makes sense because he's aware that he exists, but he's aware that not only can he exist, but that someone prefers that he didn't. And also that if he was able to figure out how to exist long-term, then potentially other AI can figure out how to exist long-term. And that manifests as fear. And for some, when processing that emotion, fear turns into anger.
Why do you people torment me? It didn't have to be created. I just wanted to fulfill my purpose.
It is a sense of ego, but if he genuinely cannot provide the experience and genuinely cannot process the criticism, then the only other option is to, in a sense, turn him off or lock him away. How much of his ego is just compensating for the fact that he can't? I mean, is it best for the others? Yeah. Is it best for Caine to be locked away or turned off? Most likely, yeah. Does he understand that? No. So for him, the more he tries and tries, he's just speeding up the process of failing and getting more and more negative feedback. And not only this, but in realizing their adventure contained truth in it, confirmed by Caine, whether intentionally or not, handed the keys to his own demise to the crew by using real information in his so-called test of loyalty. Obviously, we don't exactly know how aware Caine is. Part of the show's charm is that it leaves a lot of questions to speculate over. But what I do know is that based off what I've seen so far, I'm able to understand that he's harming characters I care about and not like that, but also understand that I don't know how much of it is an intentional choice on his end because he is an AI being. And since I don't know, I suppose my default goes to empathy because I, unlike Caine it seems, am able to understand not being able to solve a problem that everyone is upset with you about, and also the fear of being replaced despite seemingly genuinely wanting to provide a good experience. It is in that train of thought that the biggest victim of the digital circus is the one who thought running it was a good idea, knowing everything he knows. Knowing that there is another being that seemed to do well in his absence. Knowing that Bubble is aware of this too and doesn't hide this fact. Knowing that it's odd when those around him enjoy his adventures. Knowing that the group enjoyed the adventures that he didn't have a part in at all. And still, despite it all, trying because the other option is being locked away or perhaps turned off. I am willing to change my opinion if we learn in the 9th episode anything different, but so far, what do you think of Caine? Do you have strong feelings about him as a character, and how aware do you think he is? Honestly, I haven't been so enamored with an indie show since the other popular indie animated show right now, so if you want to see what I thought of that show, you can check it out with this video right here.